Hi everyone. In our third video on the martial attack, we're going to look at a perfect game conducted by the positional master Michael Adams. So Michael Adams has the black pieces. He's playing the Greek grandmaster Patronias, and this is from 1992. So let's review the moves that get us to the martial attack. So it's a Ruy Lopez, and it's a main line. And here black plays bishop to e7 to enter the closed variations. Rook e1, and this is a threat to win the pawn on e5 by removing the defender. So black blocks out the bishop, it retreats, and now the normal move would be d6 to continue down the main line, but black castles, and that's a signal that black wants to play the martial attack. c3 allows it, and Michael Adams enters the martial attack with d5. So this is a pawn sacrifice, remember? White takes on d5, unleashing another attacker on the e5 pawn. So when black recovers the pawn on d5, the e5 pawn is hanging. So white should accept that pawn gambit, and black takes the knights off the board. And the knight on d5 now needs defense. So the main way to defend it is c6. Okay, and now white establishes a pawn in the center and begins to open a line for his dark squared bishop. Bishop to d6 kicks the rook out of the center of the board. And then the main move here is rook to e1, but in this game we're going to have a look at rook to e2. This is the second most popular move, and the Greek grandmaster chooses this. So that rook is blocking the queen on d1, but perhaps it can lend some defense to the black king along the to the white king along the second rank. Okay, just like when it goes back to e1, black should continue with queen to h4. And this threatens a mate, beginning with queen takes h2 check. g3 is still the best way to defend against that check, and queen to h3. And so now the light squares around the white king are very weak, and black is going to begin his attack. Okay, white decides to develop his knight to d2 first. Now, Michael Adams plays bishop to f5, and he's developing the bishop with the intent of keeping the rook off of the e4 square. We saw in a previous video the rook coming to e4, which can sometimes threaten to go to h4 and attack our queen. So excellent prophylactic move. And now a standard move you often see white play in the martial attack is a4. Starting to get some counterplay on the queen side. White wants to get this A file opened up for his rook. But Michael Adams plays rook A, E8, and this is the standard way to set up your rooks in the martial attack. And white decides to trade off a pair of rooks. And the game is about equal. The engine actually gives a very slight edge to white in this position. But now white plays a very natural looking move, which throws away the game. He plays A takes B5, and that's a blunder, and now black has a winning attack. And this game will illustrate how important it is to play forcefully and to be tactically aware in the martial. You won't get too many chances to spot the tactics, otherwise white will just get some counterplay on the queen side and start to trade off pieces and have that extra pawn. So black needs to play very forcefully. And the winning move here, you might want to pause your video and try to find it yourself. But the winning move that Michael Adams played is the stunning sacrifice knight to f4. So the threat is queen to g2 checkmate. And so white accepted the knight. Okay, there really wasn't much choice. The only other way to defend the g2 square against checkmate is with the white queen. but it can't come to f3 to defend because it abandons the back rank, and there would be rook to e1. And if the queen goes to f1 to defend, still rook to e1, and that wins the queen because queen takes e1 leaves the g2 square and black mates. So there's no way to defend. So after knight f4, white's completely lost. He must accept the sacrifice, and now we're going to see how this attack finishes. Bishop takes f4. So this is another mate threat. The threat is not queen takes h2, but if you remember from an earlier video in the series, the threat is bishop takes h2 check, forcing the king to the h1 square. Then the bishop goes back to g3 with a discovered check. King goes back to g1. Queen goes to h2 check. King goes to f1, and the queen goes to f2 for mate. It's a standard 4-move checkmate with bishop and queen. All right, so white needs to defend that h2 square, and he has two ways to do it. He chooses knight f3 to defend it. Knight f1 is really no better, and we won't get into that. You can look into that if you'd like. But knight f3 defends h2. Now, black would like to decoy that knight away from that square so he can enact that 4-move checkmate beginning with bishop takes h2 check. So black might play rook to e1 check, hoping for knight takes e1, and then bishop takes h2 starts the mating sequence. But the problem is after rook to e1, of course, the queen is there, and the queen would take the rook, and the knight would continue to protect. So the way Michael Adams finishes off this game brilliantly is he first decoys the queen away from protecting the e1 square. Then he decoys the knight away from protecting the h2 square by playing rook to e1. And then he enacts the 4-move checkmate. So let's see how he does that. He begins with queen to g4 check, forcing the king over to f1. It can't go to h1 because of the move bishop to e4, pinning the knight, winning material, threatening a checkmate, and the position is hopeless. So the king is forced over to f1, and then bishop to d3 check, sacrificing the bishop. There are no moves for the white king. The only way to get out of check here is either queen to e2, losing the queen, or accepting the bishop's sacrifice. And that lures the queen off of protecting the e1 square. So now Adams returns with queen to h3 check, forcing king to g1, and now with that queen off of the back rank, he now plays rook to e1 check. Okay, and this decoys the knight away from the h2 square, and that allows our 4-move checkmate. And let's see it. Bishop takes h2 check, king to h1, bishop to g3 check, king to g1, queen to h2 check, king to f1, and queen takes f2 is mate. In the actual game, after queen to g4 check, Patronias played king to f1 and then resigned before Adams could finish him off with the brilliant bishop to d3 check sacrifice. So we see that this game was decided by one small blunder in this position where white played a takes b5. One innocent looking move turned out to be a complete blunder, and it's due to the fact that black has all of these pieces poised to attack that white king, and the white king has very little defense on the king side, and the light squares are just so weak on that side of the board. So if you want to play the martial attack, you've got to be tactically aware and take advantage of these opportunities and find brilliant moves like knight to f4. All right, thanks for watching the third part in this series. We'll continue with more videos soon.